Hey, what's up, you guys? My name is Xander Foster, and today I'm talking about transtrenders. If you guys can hear the rain outside, you're welcome. It's raining. I just wanted to share sort of my perspective on the word and on the concept and how it's being used within the community. If you haven't heard the term, basically transtrender refers to someone who identifies as transgender but is either identifying that way because they want attention or they think it's cool or they're sort of jumping on the trend of being trans. And I've heard a lot of trans people lately, specifically binary trans people, talk about transtrenders as if they're hurting the community. From my understanding, their thinking is that the media is representing trans people more, and so young teenagers will identify as trans to sort of be trendy or be relatable. Anyone who knows me knows that it really grinds my gears when people downplay the trans struggle and sort of sum it up to how it's represented in media or how they see it on social media. And I've talked to some people about transtrenders and about that concept, and most of them are pretty surprised to hear my take on it. First thing I want to say is I think identity policing and telling someone they are or not a certain identity doesn't help anyone. I think if someone came up to me and said, "Oh, Xander, you're not trans," that's not a constructive observation. And it's not like I'm gonna take that and say, "Oh my goodness, you're right, I'm not trans, I should like detransition." In a similar way, it doesn't do anything to me for someone else to reassure me that I'm trans and sort of validate that trans identity, because I know who I am. The strongest opinion I have surrounding the concept of transtrenders is I don't think that exploring gender or exploring identity is ever harmful. I think it's amazing that young people today are comfortable enough to say that they're trans or to explore identities outside of the gender binary, and I don't think that that's a problem. I can sympathize with people within the community that say that people who identify as trans and then end up not being trans do not represent actual trans people, but I don't think that that makes their journey invalid. You know, if you identify as trans and you end up being cis, that's okay. There was a time that I identified as a girl, and we all know how that turned out. I think the problem that trans people have, or some trans people have, with people exploring their identity and then ending up not being trans is they think that it's invalidating to their own experience. It took me years to get to the place where I didn't feel that someone else's experience invalidated my own. I think for a lot of people it's hard to coexist with others who have very different experiences than they do. But honestly, that's the reason that people who are transphobic have a hard time coexisting with trans people, because they say, how can you be trans? I can't fathom that concept in my mind because it's so different than my own experience. I really don't see, hundreds of youth identifying as trans as a way to get attention. If someone does identify as trans as a way to get attention, I don't think it's my place or anyone else's place to tell them that or to say, oh, you're not trans, because I think any form of identity policing is wrong. If you see a cis male YouTuber and he puts on a dress to sort of make fun of trans women, it's okay to tell him he's not a trans woman. But if someone comes to you or their parents or the internet and says, I think I might be trans, or I'm trans, and then they end up not being trans, that doesn't invalidate their experience. And although their experience is a cis experience because they themselves are not trans, it's not more or less valid than someone who is trans. There will always be people who are going to try to invalidate your experience. Honestly, it just kind of pisses me off to see trans people police other people's identity based on their gender presentation or expression or identity. In the same regard, I can understand feeling insecure, and I can understand seeing someone identify as an identity that you hold so close, and then that experience for them not matching your own. I know I make this comparison a lot, but it's sort of like if I as a Christian met another person who identified as Christian, and they led a lifestyle that I would not deem as Christian for myself, it's not my place to tell them they're not Christian. I think in some way, people who hold identities and become very attached to their identity feel a sense of authority over people who claim the same identity, or in some way feel authority in that community. You know, if one person identifies as trans, that doesn't make them the king of all trans people or the ruler of the trans community, and anyone who tries to like sit with you at lunch, you have to give them the test to see if they're trans or not. Every single person's trans experience is going to be different, and every single person's experience with gender is going to be different. I think that exploring gender expression, identity, and presentation is beautiful. And I think that because society is moving forward and because there is representation of gender non-conforming people in the media today, people, especially young people, are feeling more and more comfortable pushing boundaries and stepping outside the box. And I don't have any problem with that. From what I've observed of the people who use the derogatory term transtrender and target young people especially who are exploring gender identity and gender expression and trying to push boundaries, I think the overwhelming majority are people who are insecure. It's okay to be insecure, and it's okay to have those insecurities sort of triggered by... What's not okay is this identity policing and running around saying, okay, you're trans, you're not really trans, you're trans, maybe, you're not trans. That's not okay. I think what we need to do is take responsibility for our own identities. You know, if someone is doing something that I deem harmful to my community, start a conversation. Starting a conversation with someone and finding out why they do the things they do and what they're feeling beneath that and what drove them to those actions or that presentation is so much more constructive for everyone involved than hearing someone's identity, seeing their presentation, and immediately combating that with aggression or discomfort. In the spirit of Pride Month, I wanted to share my opinions on some hot LGBT topics right now and just share my perspective and where I'm coming from with a lot of these things. If there's any other topic you guys want to hear me talk about, then drop a comment down below. Make sure you like this video if you liked it, and if you want to see more from me in the future, then subscribe. Stay sweet.